The gymnasium at Naval Air Station, Pensacola smelled like floor polish and ambition. Marcus Hale pushed his mop across the basketball court's edge, working the perimeter while dress whites filled the bleachers. Graduation day. The ceremony wouldn't start for another hour, but families arrived early, cameras ready, pride radiating from every pressed uniform and polished shoe. Marcus kept his head down, his janitor's uniform navy blue and anonymous. He'd requested this shift specifically. His supervisor had looked at him strangely when he asked to work the graduation ceremony, but Marcus had his reasons. His son, Petty Officer Third Class Jordan Hale, would cross that stage today. Marcus would be here to see it, even if Jordan didn't know, even if Jordan had specifically asked him not to come. The last conversation they'd had was 3 months ago, stilted and brief. Jordan's voice had been careful, measured in that military way he'd adopted since boot camp. "Dad, I'm sending you an invitation, but you don't have to come. I know it's expensive. I know you're busy." What he'd meant was clearer in what he didn't say. "I know you're just a janitor. I know you'll look out of place. I know I'll be embarrassed." Marcus had heard all of it in the spaces between words. He'd told Jordan not to worry, that he probably couldn't make it anyway. He'd hung up and immediately requested the shift change. Now he worked the edges of the ceremony space, invisible in the way service workers always were. Officers moved past him without seeing him. Families positioned themselves in prime seating. The Navy band assembled in the corner, instruments gleaming. Marcus's mop made quiet swishing sounds against the hardwood. He'd been a janitor at NAS Pensacola for 6 years now. Before that, he'd worked maintenance at a high school in Mobile. Before that, other jobs, each one humble and honest. He'd raised Jordan alone since the boy was 4, after Jordan's mother decided the military wife life wasn't for her and left them both. Marcus had kept them afloat with calloused hands and long hours. He'd made sure Jordan ate breakfast, did homework, stayed out of trouble. He'd driven Jordan to the recruiter's office 3 years ago, pride and terror warring in his chest. Jordan had thrived in the Navy. Marcus knew this from the occasional phone call, the even less frequent email. His son was becoming someone new, someone capable and confident. Someone who maybe didn't need a janitor father showing up at his graduation. But Marcus was here anyway, mop in hand, watching the room fill with people who belonged. He wore long sleeves despite the Florida heat. He always wore long sleeves. Admiral Patricia Vance arrived exactly 45 minutes before the ceremony. Marcus noticed her immediately, 3 stars on her shoulder boards, her uniform immaculate, her bearing commanding. She moved through the gymnasium with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades navigating military spaces. Officers straightened as she passed. The ceremony coordinator rushed over with a clipboard and a nervous smile. Marcus kept mopping, staying in his lane. He'd learned long ago how to exist in spaces without being noticed. It was a skill, one he'd perfected through years of service work. The Admiral walked the perimeter of the space, inspecting the setup with a critical eye. She paused near the platform where graduates would receive their certificates, adjusting a flag's position slightly. She nodded approval at the banner displaying the Naval Aviation School's command crest. She moved toward the bleachers, and Marcus smoothly shifted his position, mop bucket rattling slightly as he wheeled it toward the far corner. He didn't want to be in anyone's way, especially not a 3-star admiral's. But fate or chance or simple geometry put them on intersecting paths. Marcus was backing up, checking his work on the floor, when he bumped his mop bucket into something solid. He turned, apology already forming, and found himself face to face with Admiral Vance. She'd been examining the basketball hoop's height, and his bucket had rolled directly into her polished shoes. "Sorry, ma'am," Marcus said quickly, moving to retrieve the bucket. "My fault, wasn't paying attention." "No harm done," Admiral Vance replied, her voice carrying that particular authority that came from commanding carrier groups and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. She stepped back, giving him room to collect his equipment. Marcus bent to grab the bucket handle and his sleeve rode up, just a few inches, just enough to expose the edge of black ink on his right forearm, a trident surrounded by an eagle's wings partially visible beneath the fabric. He yanked his sleeve down immediately, but not before the Admiral's gaze locked onto it. Her expression changed, shifted. Something like recognition flashed across her face, followed by something deeper: surprise, calculation, question. She stared at his forearm for a long moment. Marcus kept his eyes down, his hand on the bucket handle, wishing he could disappear into the floor he'd been cleaning. He felt her gaze like pressure, like searchlights finding something that wanted to stay hidden. "That tattoo," Admiral Vance said quietly. Her voice had changed completely. The command was still there, but underneath it was something else. Curiosity, maybe respect. "May I see it?" Marcus hesitated. This was exactly what he'd been avoiding for 6 years. The attention, the questions, the past breaking through into his carefully constructed present. He looked around the gymnasium, families gathering, sailors assembling, his son somewhere in the building preparing to graduate. He could refuse. He could say it was nothing, just old ink, just decoration. He could walk away. But Admiral Patricia Vance wasn't someone who asked questions casually, and the look in her eyes suggested she already knew what she'd seen. Slowly, Marcus rolled up his right sleeve. The tattoo revealed itself inch by inch, the Navy SEAL trident in sharp black lines, the eagle's wings spread wide, the anchor descending, the pistol held firm, the trident's 3 prongs reaching upward. Around it, in smaller script, were numbers, a date. Below that, barely visible unless you knew to look, a single word in Latin: fortitudine. Admiral Vance inhaled sharply. She leaned in, studying the tattoo with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Her eyes traced every line, every detail. When she looked up at his face, her expression had transformed completely. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus Hale, ma'am." She went very still. "Marcus Hale, Petty Officer First Class Marcus Hale." Marcus said quietly. "Long time ago." "Operation Neptune Spear," Admiral Vance said. "It wasn't a question. You were there." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The date on his tattoo answered for him: May 2, 2011. The night that changed everything. The night that ended one chapter of history and started another. The night 23 Navy SEALs flew into Abbottabad, Pakistan, and eliminated the world's most wanted terrorist. "I was a captain then," Admiral Vance continued, her voice low enough that only Marcus could hear. "Intelligence liaison. I helped coordinate the operation from the carrier group. I knew every operator's name, every man who went into that compound." She paused, studying his face as if comparing it to a memory. "You were part of DEVGRU. You were in that helicopter." Marcus said nothing. Around them, the gymnasium continued filling with people. The ceremony would start soon. Jordan would cross that stage, receive his certificate, begin his career. Marcus needed this conversation to end. He needed to return to being invisible. "Why are you working as a janitor?" Admiral Vance asked. The question wasn't judgmental. It was genuinely confused, almost pained. "You're a decorated operator. You could." "I'm here to watch my son graduate," Marcus interrupted quietly. "That's all. Just want to see him walk across that stage. Then I'll finish my shift and go home." Admiral Vance studied him for a long moment. Marcus saw her processing information, making connections, reading between lines the way good intelligence officers learn to do. Her expression softened. "Your son is graduating today," she repeated, "from Aviation School's command." "Yes, ma'am. Petty Officer Third Class Jordan Hale. He's going to be an aviation ordnanceman." "And he doesn't know you're here." It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. "He asked me not to come. Thought it would be better if I wasn't around. I'm just the janitor, Dad. He's building something new. Doesn't need the old life dragging him down." Admiral Vance's jaw tightened. "He doesn't know." "No, ma'am. He doesn't know about any of it. He was 7 when I got out. I never told him. Thought it was better that way." "Better that your son doesn't know his father is a hero." Better that he builds his own life, Marcus said firmly. Makes his own reputation, stands on his own merit, not living in anyone's shadow, not dealing with questions or expectations or comparisons, just being Jordan, just being himself. Admiral Vance looked at Marcus for a long moment, and something in her expression suggested she understood more than she was saying. She understood sacrifice. She understood the weight of service and the complicated math of fatherhood and the impossible choices people made to protect the ones they loved. "I need to make a phone call," she said finally. "Will you wait here?" "Ma'am, I need to finish." "That's an order, Petty Officer Hale." Marcus blinked. "I'm not active duty, ma'am." "Some things don't expire," Admiral Vance said. "Wait here, please." She walked away before Marcus could respond, her phone already at her ear. Marcus stood in the corner of the gymnasium, mop in hand, sleeves still rolled up, feeling exposed and uncertain. Around him, the ceremony preparations continued. The band tuned their instruments. The ceremony coordinator checked her watch. Families found their seats. And somewhere in the building, Jordan was preparing to graduate, unaware that his father was here, unaware of everything that had come before. Admiral Vance returned 15 minutes later. Her expression was unreadable, but there was purpose in her stride. She approached Marcus directly, ignoring the curious glances from nearby officers who noticed a three-star admiral speaking intensely with a janitor. "Change of plans," she said. "You're not watching from the corner." "Ma'am, I'm fine here. I don't need." "Marcus," she interrupted, using his first name deliberately. "Your son is about to graduate from aviation school's command. It's an important day. You should be in the stands. You should be visible. You should be present." "He doesn't want me there," he said. "He's 21 years old and doesn't know what he wants," Admiral Vance said bluntly. "And more importantly, he doesn't know who you are. But he's about to." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. "Ma'am, please, I came here to watch quietly. I don't want to disrupt his day. I don't want attention. I just want." "I'm speaking at the ceremony," Admiral Vance said. "I'm the guest of honor. I give a speech to the graduates about service and sacrifice and what it means to wear the uniform." She paused, her eyes holding his. "Today, I'm going to tell a different story." "No," Marcus said immediately. "Ma'am, respectfully, I'm asking you not to do that." "Why did you get the tattoo?" Admiral Vance asked suddenly. "After the operation, after everything. You could have stayed quiet about it. The mission was classified for years. You could have gotten out, moved on, never mentioned it. But you marked yourself permanently with the trident and the date. Why?" Marcus looked down at his forearm, at the ink that had become part of his skin 12 years ago. "Because it mattered," he said quietly. "Because those men mattered. Because that night mattered. Because some things you don't forget and some things you don't pretend didn't happen. Even if the world moves on, even if you become someone different afterward, you carry it. You remember. You honor it." "Exactly," Admiral Vance said. "You honor it, so let me honor you. Let me honor what you did. Let your son know who his father is." "He'll hate me," Marcus said. "He'll wonder why I never told him. He'll think I lied to him his whole life." "Or he'll understand," Admiral Vance said, "that you loved him enough to let him find his own way, that you were strong enough to step back and let him become his own man, that you served your country in the shadows and then served your son in the same way without recognition, without credit, without expectation." She paused. "That's not something to hide. That's something to be proud of." The ceremony began 20 minutes later. Marcus sat in the front row, his janitor uniform conspicuous among the dress whites and civilian Sunday best surrounding him. Admiral Vance had insisted, and when a three-star admiral insisted, things happened. The ceremony coordinator had looked confused but found him a seat immediately. Marcus felt every eye on him, felt the weight of attention he'd spent 6 years avoiding. His hands gripped his knees, and he stared straight ahead at the empty stage. The Navy band played the national anthem. Everyone stood, hands over hearts. Marcus rose with them, his voice joining the others in words he'd sung hundreds of times in dozens of countries under circumstances that ranged from routine to life-altering. The music swelled and ended, and everyone sat. The ceremony coordinator welcomed the families and guests. She introduced the commanding officer of Aviation School's command, a captain who spoke about the graduates' achievements and potential. She introduced several distinguished visitors, and then she introduced Admiral Patricia Vance, Deputy Commander of Naval Air Forces. The Admiral took the stage with confidence, her uniform perfect, her bearing commanding. She surveyed the assembled graduates, young men and women in dress whites, fresh-faced and eager, ready to begin their service. She looked at the families in the stands, and her gaze found Marcus, held him for a moment before she began to speak. "Today we celebrate achievement," Admiral Vance said, her voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium. "Today we recognize the completion of training, the beginning of service, the start of careers that will take you to carriers and shore stations, to deployments and maintenance bays, to challenges and triumphs we cannot yet imagine. You have earned your place here. You have worked hard. You deserve this moment." She paused, letting the words settle. "But I want to talk to you about something else. I want to talk about what comes after, what service looks like over years and decades, what sacrifice means when the ceremonies end and the real work begins." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He wanted to stand up, walk out, disappear back into the utility corridors where he belonged, but he couldn't move, couldn't look away. "In May of 2011, Admiral Vance continued, I was a captain serving as an intelligence liaison officer. I was part of the planning and coordination for a mission that would become one of the most significant military operations in modern history. Operation Neptune Spear, the raid on Abbottabad, the mission that eliminated Osama bin Laden." The gymnasium went completely silent. Every graduate, every family member, every officer leaned forward. Admiral Vance had their absolute attention. 23 Navy SEALs went into that compound, she said. They flew in on modified Black Hawks in the middle of the night into hostile territory with no backup and no margin for error. They executed their mission with precision and courage. They came home. And then they did what special operators do: they returned to the shadows. Most of their names remain classified. Their faces aren't shown. Their service continues without public recognition because that's what they signed up for. That's what it means to be a quiet professional. Admiral Vance's gaze found Marcus again. One of those operators left the Navy a year after the mission. He was decorated. He had opportunities for promotion, for continued service in elite units, for a career that would have been extraordinary. But he made a different choice. He became a single father. He raised his son alone. He worked humble jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. He never told his son what he'd done, never sought recognition, never asked for anything except the chance to be a good father. Marcus closed his eyes. Around him, he heard murmurs, whispers, people putting pieces together. "That man is here today," Admiral Vance said. "He's here because his son is graduating from Aviation School's command. He came to watch from the shadows, the way he's lived for the past 12 years. He wore his janitor uniform and brought his mop, and he planned to see his son walk across this stage without his son ever knowing he was here. Because that's the kind of father he is. That's the kind of man he is." Jordan's voice came from somewhere in the assembled graduates. "Dad." Confusion and dawning realization in one word. "Petty Officer 3rd Class Jordan Hale," Admiral Vance said, looking at the formation of graduates. "Your father is Marcus Hale. He's a Navy SEAL. He was part of the team that killed bin Laden. He carries the trident on his forearm and those memories in his heart. And he's been working as a janitor at this station for 6 years because he wanted to be close to the Navy, close to the work you chose, close to supporting you even if you didn't know it. He's here today. And I think it's time you saw him." Marcus opened his eyes. The entire gymnasium was looking at him. Hundreds of faces all turned in his direction. He saw shock, respect, curiosity, wonder. And then movement in the graduate formation. Jordan breaking ranks, walking forward, his face a complicated storm of emotions. Jordan stopped 10 feet away, staring at his father. "Dad," he said again, "is that true?" Marcus stood slowly. His legs felt unsteady. He faced his son across the polished floor, aware of every eye watching them. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it's true. You were there at Abbottabad. You were part of that." "I was. And you never told me." It wasn't quite accusatory. It was bewildered, overwhelmed processing. "Wanted you to make your own way," Marcus said. "Didn't want you living in shadows or dealing with expectations that weren't yours. Wanted you to be Jordan, just Jordan, nothing else weighing on you." Jordan stared at him for a long moment. Then, in front of the entire graduation ceremony, in front of admirals and officers and families and fellow graduates, Jordan closed the distance between them and threw his arms around his father. Marcus hugged him back, feeling his son's shoulders shake, feeling the weight of 12 years of careful distance collapse in an instant. "You should have told me," Jordan whispered against his father's shoulder. "I should have known." "You know now," Marcus said. "That's what matters." They stood there while the gymnasium erupted in applause. Admiral Vance watched from the stage, a small smile on her face. The other graduates were on their feet, clapping. The families joined them. The sound echoed off the walls like thunder, like recognition, like respect finally given and finally received. When Jordan pulled back, his eyes were red, but his expression was transformed. "You were going to watch from the corner," he said, "with your mop." "Was the plan," Marcus admitted. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Yeah, well, I'm just a janitor, not known for great plans." "You're not a janitor," Jordan said fiercely. "You're a SEAL, you're a hero. He stopped, struggling for words. "You're my dad, and I'm sorry I asked you not to come. I'm sorry I was embarrassed. I'm sorry I didn't understand." "Nothing to be sorry for," Marcus said. "You're here. You're graduating, you're becoming something. That's all I ever wanted." Admiral Vance let the moment extend, let father and son have their reunion, let the applause continue. Then she raised a hand for silence, and the gymnasium gradually quieted. Jordan reluctantly returned to his formation, looking back at his father repeatedly. Marcus sat back down, feeling exposed and raw and somehow lighter than he'd been in years. The ceremony continued. Graduates were called forward by name, crossing the stage to receive their certificates. When Jordan's name was announced, Petty Officer 3rd Class Jordan Hale, Aviation Ordnanceman Marcus stood, clapping harder than he'd ever clapped in his life. Jordan crossed the stage, accepted his certificate, shook hands with the commanding officer and Admiral Vance. And when he looked out at the crowd, he found his father immediately, and his smile was brilliant and proud and completely without reservation. After the ceremony, Marcus found himself surrounded. Officers approached him with firm handshakes and respectful nods. Graduates wanted to meet him, shake his hand, thank him for his service. Families took photos with him, asking about that night in May 2011, about what it meant to be a SEAL, about the sacrifices involved. Marcus answered carefully, deflecting when questions got too specific, honoring operational security even 12 years later. But he didn't hide. For the first time in years, he stood in the light and let people see him. Jordan introduced him to his classmates, his instructors, his friends. "This is my dad," he said repeatedly, and each time the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "He's a Navy SEAL. He was at Abbottabad." Admiral Vance found Marcus near the end of the event. The crowd had thinned, graduates dispersing with their families, the gymnasium slowly emptying. She approached him with two other officers, a commander and a lieutenant commander, both wearing Naval Special Warfare insignia. "Marcus," she said, "I'd like you to meet Commander Rick Torres and Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo. They're both with Naval Special Warfare Command. I took the liberty of making a call." Commander Torres extended his hand. "Petty Officer Hale, honor to meet you. Admiral Vance filled us in on your background. We've been reviewing your record." Sir, I've been out for 12 years, Marcus said carefully. I'm not looking to come back. We're not recruiting you for active duty, Torres said, but we are interested in talking to you about another opportunity. SEAL training in Coronado needs instructors. Men who have been there, done that, who can teach the next generation. Men with your experience and your perspective. He paused. It's steady work, good pay. You be close to the community again. And your son is going to be stationed at North Island in 2 months. You'd be in the same area. Marcus looked at Jordan, who was watching the conversation from across the gymnasium. His son gave him a small nod, an encouraging smile. Marcus turned back to Commander Torres. I haven't been in that world in a long time, Marcus said. I'm not sure I'd be any good at it anymore. You carried that trident tattoo for 12 years while working as a janitor, Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo said. You never forgot who you were. You just set it aside to raise your son. That's not losing it. That's prioritizing. That's discipline. That's exactly what we need in instructors, men who understand that the job isn't about glory. It's about service. It's about doing what needs to be done, whether anyone's watching or not. Admiral Vance placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You've been in the shadows long enough, she said quietly. Your son knows now. He's proud of you. He wants you to be proud of yourself. Maybe it's time to come back, not to combat, not to missions, but to teaching, to passing on what you know, to helping other men become what you were. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a door opening, a possibility emerging. For 12 years, he'd defined himself by what he'd left behind, the teams, the missions, the brotherhood, the identity. He'd thought that part of his life was over, sealed away, something to remember but never reclaim. But maybe there was a middle ground. Maybe there was a way to honor both the father he'd become and the operator he'd been. I'll think about it, Marcus said. Can I have some time? Take all the time you need, Commander Torres said. He handed Marcus a business card. My contact information. Call me when you're ready to talk. They shook hands again and the officers departed. Marcus stood in the emptying gymnasium, business card in one hand, future suddenly uncertain in the best possible way. Jordan approached, still in his dress whites, his certificate folder tucked under his arm. They want you to teach, Jordan asked. Seems like it. You should do it. Yeah. Dad, you're 43. You've been pushing mops for 6 years. You've got knowledge and experience that people need. You've got things to teach. Jordan paused. And I want my friends to know who you are. I want people to know what you did, not for me. For you, you deserve to be seen. Marcus looked at his son, this young man who he'd raised alone, who he'd protected fiercely, who he'd loved enough to step back and let grow. Jordan had become strong and capable and good, and Marcus had played his part in that by being present, by being steady, by being there even when it wasn't glamorous or recognized. Okay, Marcus said. I'll call them, I'll talk about it, see what it looks like. Jordan grinned. Good, because I really want to visit you in Coronado. Coronado's way better than Pensacola. They left the gymnasium together as the sun set over the Gulf. Marcus's mop and bucket were still in the utility closet where he'd left them. He'd retrieve them Monday, finish his remaining shifts, give his notice. But tonight, he walked out the front door with his son, visible and acknowledged, no longer hiding. Admiral Vance watched them go from her office window. She'd spent 31 years in the Navy, commanded thousands of sailors, made decisions that affected operations across the globe. But today's decision to expose Marcus Hale's story, to bring him into the light, felt like one of the most important she'd ever made. Service took many forms. Heroism wore many faces. Sometimes the bravest thing a warrior could do was set down his weapons and pick up his son. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the beach at Coronado, watching SEAL candidates run through surf torture. He wore khaki shorts and a Navy instructor polo, a whistle around his neck, the trident tattoo visible on his right forearm. The candidates didn't know his story yet. They would, eventually. But first they'd know him as Instructor Hale, hard but fair, experienced but humble, someone who'd been exactly where they were trying to go. Jordan visited on weekends, bringing food and stories from North Island. They'd grown closer since graduation, rebuilding their relationship on honesty instead of omission. Marcus told Jordan stories from his SEAL days, carefully edited but true. Jordan told Marcus about aircraft maintenance, about the complexity of ordnance systems, about his own growing reputation as someone thorough and reliable. One Saturday, they sat on the beach together, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Jordan wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a navy t-shirt. Marcus wore a polo shirt, his tattoo visible in the fading light. "Do you ever regret it?" Jordan asked. "Getting out, becoming a janitor, all those years you could have stayed in, kept going, done more." Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I did what I needed to do. You needed a father more than the Navy needed another operator. And I got to watch you grow up. I got to be there. Even when you didn't know I was there, I was there. That mattered more than anything else." "But you could have told me," Jordan said. "You could have had both. You didn't have to hide who you were." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But maybe you needed to find your own way first, build your own confidence, make your own choices. If you'd known from the beginning, would you have joined because you wanted to or because you felt like you had to live up to something? Would you have felt free to be yourself, or would you have felt pressure to be like me?" Jordan was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I needed to make that choice as Jordan, not as the son of a SEAL." "That's what I thought," Marcus said. "And watching you succeed on your own terms, building your own reputation, becoming your own man, that was worth everything. That was the mission. You were the mission. And I'd do it exactly the same way again." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple and gold. Behind them, SEAL candidates ran training exercises, their instructors calling cadence, the endless cycle of preparation continuing. In front of them, the Pacific stretched to the horizon, vast and deep and full of possibilities. Marcus thought about the path that had brought him here, from Abbottabad to Pensacola to Coronado, from operator to janitor to instructor, from shadows to light. He thought about the choices he'd made, the sacrifices and the quiet victories. He thought about his son, proud in his dress whites, finally understanding who his father was. He thought about Admiral Vance, who'd seen a tattoo and refused to let it remain hidden. He thought about the life he'd built and the life he was building now. The Navy SEAL trident on his forearm caught the sunset light, the eagle's wings glowing gold. Below it, that single word, fortitude, strength. The courage to do what was necessary, whether anyone was watching or not, whether anyone ever knew or not. Marcus had served in the shadows for most of his life, both in special operations and in fatherhood. He'd done what needed to be done without recognition, without acknowledgement, without expectation of reward. He'd carried his trident in silence. He'd honored his service through the way he lived, not through what he said. He'd been present when it mattered most. And now, sitting on this beach with his son beside him, watching the sun set on another day, Marcus understood that it had all been worth it. Every sacrifice, every humble job, every moment of choosing silence over pride. Because Jordan was here, Jordan was strong, Jordan was proud, Jordan knew. The mission was complete, and the next mission was just beginning. "Come on," Marcus said, standing and brushing sand from his shorts. "I'll buy you dinner. You can tell me more about that aircraft carrier deployment you're hopping for." "Yeah," Jordan stood, grinning. "You really want to hear about catapult systems and munition storage?" "Kid, I sat in a helicopter flying into Pakistan to get Bin Laden," Marcus said. "I think I can handle some aircraft carrier talk." They walked up the beach together, father and son, SEAL and sailor, connected by blood and service and choices made in silence and love given without condition. Behind them, the Pacific waves rolled endlessly forward, carrying new operators toward their futures, carrying old operators toward their next purpose. The sun set completely, stars emerging in the darkening sky, And Marcus Hale, who'd once been invisible by choice, who'd hidden his light to let his sun shine, walked into the evening no longer afraid of being seen. He'd served in darkness for 12 years. Now he served in light. Both had been necessary. Both had been right. Both had been his duty. The trident on his arm would never fade. The memories would never diminish. The man he'd been would always be part of the man he was. And that was exactly as it should be. Some things you carried forever. Some missions never really ended. Some service lasted a lifetime, changing form but never changing purpose. Marcus had learned this truth in the hardest way, by living it, day after day, mop in hand, pride set aside, love given freely. And he'd do it all again. Every single day, every single choice, every single sacrifice. Because that's what fortitude meant. That's what service demanded. That's what fathers did. And Marcus Hale was both a father and a warrior. He'd always been both. He just needed time and a 3-star admiral with sharp eyes to remember.